Hey everybody, day 2. This is going to be rough and ready. Just got off 8.5 hours of watching this stuff. Shout out to Sean Donnelly and T&D Tesla, who was just with you a minute ago. Here I am. This is a distillation of all the big takeaways from day 2 of Bitcoin Nashville. And let's jump in. I'll also summarize all the promises made by a couple of candidates, RFK, Trump, etc., share some other goodness that's coming from many different places. I'm just waiting for this thing to pop up live, and I hope everything is working. So let's go. Thank you as well, Angle Blackson. Again, T&D Tesla, showing all the promises made. We got sound. Good. Let's go. Been a hell of a long day. And I hope you enjoy this. And again, I just try and summarize what I believe is the most pertinent stuff shared today. And there was a lot. By the way, math, money, freedom. There was a lot of talk about money and freedom at this conference. This is my original logo when I started this 3.5 years ago. And now this financial advice, who cares? Forget about that. Let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, this is not dominance. These are two little charts. I thought I would kick it off with a chart as to where we are from Hey Apollo 2014 to 2017 cycle. And we look very, very like that cycle 2022 to 2025. That says we have a long, long way to go. Hey, Apollo is extremely bullish, looking at something like $300,000 Bitcoin. But with all the stuff we heard at this conference, anything is possible. CERN Dragon too. By the way, speaking live, a lot of people were expecting Bitcoin to tank after the Trump show. It tanked during the show, and it rebounded after the show, and I'll explain why as well. So let's go. Sometimes things need to be distilled. Before I jump into all the Bitcoin conference stuff, we have yet another Bitcoin treasury. I talked about 3 pension funds this week. Now we have another kind of MicroStrategy playbook player called OneMedNet. Not a lot, but they are raising $4.6 million, private placement, to buy Bitcoin. The stock is up 22%, like that. Any company that wants to boost their stock price, buy Bitcoin. By the way, this is brought to you by kombucha to try and clear my mind from the whole day of brain damage. First of all, I'm going to talk about all the sessions briefly and summarize the pertinent stuff that they shared. Edward Snowden, great guy. You can see him here, a very brave individual. He came out with a little bit of a cold shower stuff. A little bit of good news first from Edward Snowden. I'll blow this up. He spoke about the growing alternative systems, alternatives to the existing systems. A big push for things like open source models are extremely important. A big stress on decentralization, privacy, etc. And he also talked about the fact that there's a lot of growing interest in politicians in Bitcoin. But that comes with a big warning. Basically, as far as he is concerned, do not trust politicians. Do not let them or whatever they pander at a given time to sway your vote in any way. But he said the most important thing for us is the good news. There is the open source models, growing political interest, and growing need for decentralized systems. But he did douse this with a big bucket of cold water. And he said the bad news is, first of all, a couple of things. He spoke about concentration of power, a growing concentration of resources and power in the hands of a few tech giants and financial giants. He didn't mention financial giants, but I think he meant to. He spoke about privacy risks. Bitcoin transactions are not private, and the lack of anonymity can expose personal data, leading to potential misuse by various entities and, of course, criminals. And he spoke about regulatory challenges. Regulatory frameworks such as GDPR have proven ineffective in curbing the abuses by large corporations, highlighting the need for more robust privacy. He's very big on privacy, and he didn't like the fact there was increased surveillance out there in the world and everything else. So that was Edward Snowden. He wasn't exactly, hoorah, let me pump your Bitcoin bags, but rather be careful out there. Now, then we have RFK. Probably the best talk today, in my opinion. He came out and said a number of good things, and I'll try to break it down in simple terms. First of all, I broke into three different areas. I saw, first of all, a lot around values and commitments from RFK, who is another presidential candidate, by the way. Pardon promises. He pledges to pardon Russ Ulbricht, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, previous guy I just mentioned, on his first day in office. The other candidate only mentioned one of those people. That was Ross. Also, he spoke about Bitcoin community values. He praises the community, the unity, the democratic values, and commitment to freedom, contrasting it to the centralized control of financial systems. So a little bit dovetailing to some of what Snowden said. But again, that was his promises so far. He spoke about Bitcoin and society. This was kind of interesting. The impact on society, not only the environmental impact, he highlighted Bitcoin's mining potential to incentivize investments in green and renewable energy production. And that is a big part of what Bitcoin mining is all about. If you read mainstream media, you will not understand that. But he gets it. And it showed that RFK really has a deep understanding of what Bitcoin is and how it works. He also spoke about, again, decentralization and privacy. RFK emphasized the importance of direct ownership of Bitcoin, free from capital gains tax, woohoo, to prevent centralized control by entities like BlackRock. Wouldn't that be nice? Tax-free Bitcoin. He also spoke about, it reminds me of Jason Lowery, Bitcoin as cyber defense. He described it as a cyber defense system to protect online identities and data with potential implications for national security, which I found really, really interesting. Wouldn't it be great to have this guy? He seems to get it all. Also, the third part that I picked up from his speech was Bitcoin strategic policies, what he would do if he was elected into office. First of all, the US has about 210,000 to 208,000 Bitcoin. If I recall, he would try to make this a treasury asset as a strategic asset. Also, he would buy 550 Bitcoin daily until the US had a reserve of at least 4 million Bitcoins. Wouldn't that be a nice DCA strategy? 550 Bitcoin a day. And by the way, I'll come back later to this and talk about what Senator Lummis had to say about that too. Super interesting. Bitcoin's valuation would go to hundreds of trillions of dollars. Pump our bags. And non-taxable Bitcoin, as I mentioned, 1031 exchange eligibility. That's very important, which means you could swap your Bitcoin for real estate. Again, tax-free. And reserve position in Bitcoin, having about 19% of global gold reserves. Backing as well US debt with hard assets. So they can't just print money willy-nilly, but it has to be backed by things like Bitcoin and gold. So from that perspective, I thought it was super interesting to hear all he had to say. And a quick recap, which was also picked up by Bloomberg magazine. They said, did RFK upstage Trump by building his claims of a Bitcoin Fort Knox? Again, it would have been hard for the second candidate to trump, excuse the pun, to trump what RFK said, because he had everything spelled out beautifully with concrete numbers and a plan, and I like that. So kudos to RFK. Now, another big news that was released today too, Cantor Fitzgerald. This was a business that was absolutely destroyed in 9/11, and I remember it well. But they mentioned they would have $2 billion of initial financing available with significant growth expected. Once that is exhausted, they'll get another $2 billion and another $2 billion after that. The idea is you can use your Bitcoin to finance stuff. So imagine you've got a big bag of Bitcoin and you need to access cash to run a business, start a business, buy some real estate. They will provide you financing. This is good. This means you can lever your Bitcoin. You never have to sell it for your lifestyle expenses, which is awesome. And not only did Cantor Fitzgerald CEO say that he has a truckload of Bitcoin, I think it was Howard Lutnick, if I'm not mistaken, but he also said the firm has a truckload of Bitcoin as well. And he also spoke about Tether being fully backed because they manage their money. So moving on. There was some Ledger wallet news, and you may remember last year there was a lot of kerfuffle around the Ledger backdoor, let's just call it. But they came out, and I call this a bit of an about face. The CEO, Pascal Gauthier, if I remember, He was on stage to introduce 2 new products from Ledger. I'll talk about them very briefly and what they have planned, which, I don't know, there's a couple of stats here that blew me away. One is they have these new 2 devices, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. It's funny, Stacks, maybe like the layer 2 Bitcoin project, probably a partnership. But also they said that 7 million Ledger devices currently secure more than 20% of all Bitcoin. That was astounding to me, especially after everything that happened last year. Also, the new product we priced, the Flex, will be priced at $249, and it aims to replace traditional security keys and Google Authenticator. I didn't dig much into this new wallet at all, but also they will pledge some support for Bitcoin Core development. So that's the Ledger update. A lot of stuff happened today. Also, John Deaton came out, and he is the challenger to Elizabeth Warren, who is waging an anti-crypto war. He's a pro-crypto guy. He spoke... it's interesting, the amount of people that have made it, that grew up on welfare, like people like John Deaton and Shamath Palihapitiya and so many others came from very, very poor circumstances. And they embrace things like Bitcoin because they know it's a way out. And it's something that they wish they had when they were younger. So that's really cool. But John Deaton said 82% of his net worth is in Bitcoin. So I thought that was interesting. And a quick debt reminder, just to refresh you, why we Bitcoin, from EJ Anthony. Shout out to Sanjay for sharing. The debt just hit $34.998 trillion. They added $28 billion yesterday. I mean, this stuff is just spiraling out of control quicker than you can even imagine. Okay? Your dollar is going to debase quicker than a melting ice cube. Now, I covered this already, but I thought it'd be important because we are going to talk about some of the promises that come up later. But Joe Consorti said, Trump will want to capture as much of RFK's vote as he can, even though he's not a threat in the polls. Game theory. And this goes back to the strategic Bitcoin reserve is coming to the United States of America. The question is, who will win? Engel Blackson, thank you so much again. Which side, left or right or middle? I consider, say, Harris on the left, Trump on the right, RFK in the middle. We don't know how it's going to play out, but they're grappling. And there was actually some breaking news, which I didn't include here, just came in, but the Democratic Party filed a big letter with the CC to Kamala Harris to implore them to make some changes, like swap out Gary Gensler and stuff. Gary Gensler was mentioned a lot today as well. It's unbelievable how unpopular that person is. Imagine being him. Anyway, I think I may have mentioned this yesterday, but I don't know. Semler Scientific buying more Bitcoin, along with OneMed, buying more Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, whenever they can, buying more Bitcoin, Metaplex, buying more Bitcoin, the pensions, buying more Bitcoin. This thing is going to get really scarce really fast. If a government decides to make this a treasury asset and play the MicroStrategy playbook game, it's game over. We can all sit back and relax, ladies and gentlemen. But maybe that's a dream. Maybe it's going to happen. We'll find out in a year or less. Also, I did mention the 500 Bitcoin a day. I did warn you, this is rough and ready. Russell Brand was on too with Chris Pavlovski. He's the head of Rumble, and they spoke a lot about freedom of speech and decentralization and how it ties so directly in with Bitcoin. The ability to have authentic and unrestricted communications, countering censorship by major big tech companies. By the way, it seems like big tech companies, and here I am streaming on a big tech company, YouTube, Google, but big tech companies and big finance, TradFi companies were not popular at this show at all. Pavlovski discussed his history of how he was shut down in so many countries around the world because they were saying things or sharing things that leaders of those countries did not want to hear. And they spoke a lot about the common elements between Bitcoin and freedom and open society and lack of censorship is just so, so important as we go forward, especially when certain countries around the world want to just shove central bank digital currencies down people's throats. I'll come back to that in a second too. Also, another shout out, Bitcoin is anti-dictator money. That's kind of like a term that you pick up from listening to somebody like Edward Snowden. I thought I'd shove that back in here. because it's so important. A dictator would not like the people in the country to have that type of financial freedom with Bitcoin. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Game theory could overcome that. Now, this is another session too. Billionaires and Bitcoin. This is Bill Miller IV, son of Bill Miller III, legendary investor. They spoke about the growing acceptance of Bitcoin by companies, family offices, and institutional investors, noting significant market signals coming in the performance of Bitcoin, because all of these big money player investors, they are sniffing around. They haven't jumped in yet. That was kind of like the takeaway I got from this too. Plus, Bill Miller and his father have a big bag of Bitcoin too, which is great. Now, let's get into at least what many believe to be the highlight of the show. I thought about having a glass of wine doing this stream because honestly, it was hard to listen to. It was all over the place, but that's typical. But I tried to summarize the points, and then I'll summarize the promises at the end. So bear with me. This is not structured, and I like things to be structured. So let's just go to remarks part 1. And literally, this is fresh off the printer. First of all, Trump admires the Bitcoin community. He said it's the steel industry of 100 years ago. I didn't quite get that. He said it'll be larger than gold. Correct. He said it's the miracle of cooperation and human achievement. In some part, yes, but it was mostly built by a very, very small team. And he said 2 words, America first. He wants to do it before China and others, and it's a vision for America. The most important part here is that game theory element. In his mind, he knows enough about Bitcoin now to understand the game theory element. The country that prints cash first to stack first wins. So whoever's whispering in his ear said, get in there before China does. So there's a very, very good chance that if this guy is elected or RFK is elected, they will make Bitcoin a treasury asset to some, maybe, if you can trust politicians. Remarks part 2. He spoke about AI and electricity, and that the electric grid needs to double in capacity in order for the US to dominate in these areas. He wants USA to be the crypto capital of the planet and to be a leader in Bitcoin. He wants USA to be a nation that leads the way to mine Bitcoin. Great for the Bitcoin miners. I'm sure they're spiking now too. He also accepts Bitcoin donations and crypto donations, and they've already pulled in $25 million worth of crypto, which he probably likes. He spoke of the left targeting crypto and choke point. He said day 1 he would fire Gary Gensler, and the audience erupted. Then he said it again, and the audience erupted again. Gary Gensler is not a popular person. And he said he shut down Elizabeth Warren and Operation Choke Point, and did Warren against Warren and the left. But that's what candidates do. But Warren and Gensler, they're not our friends. If you like Bitcoin, you're not going to like those people. Hope that's okay that I said that. Also, remarks part 3, clear up US crypto laws, very important. Retain crypto jobs in the USA, and he will appoint a crypto professional advisory council. Day 1 too, he would ban all central bank digital currencies, and he believes in the right to self-custody, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and he spoke as well about storing all your savings in Bitcoin. And a very interesting angle too, because rewind the clock 4 years, he said, I love the dollar. I don't like Bitcoin. Today, he said, Bitcoin is not a threat to the dollar. The US government is a threat to the dollar. So I thought that was quite profound. Remarks part 4, he wants the US to be a Bitcoin mining powerhouse. Federal government have that 210 Bitcoin, about 1% of the amount. He said, never sell your Bitcoin. Policy of my admin is to keep 100% of all Bitcoin and hold it as a core of the reserve of strategic national Bitcoin stockpile and commute the Ross sentence. Now, I'll come back to his strategy versus RFK in a second because Cynthia Lummis shed some light on that in the event. But this is a quick summary that we picked up of the promises. And the good thing about the internet, it's forever. So these promises are now out there, and now we can write them down and take a screenshot of them and then see if the politicians live up to their promises. 1, fire Gary Gensler. 2, shut down Operation Choke Point. 3, ensure Bitcoin jobs, crypto jobs stay in America. 4, appoint a Bitcoin advisory council. 5, ban creation of CBDCs. Woohoo. 6, uphold the right to self-custody Bitcoin. 7, create a framework to enable stablecoins, which should have been done years ago. Number 8, promise not to sell government Bitcoin. And 9, commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to time served. 10, support Bitcoin mining. And 11, support the establishment of a Bitcoin reserve. This is where Cynthia Lummis comes in right now, because she kind of explained or rehashed a lot of what I guess it was difficult to piece out, like pulling out these 5 points that were spread over a random speech was not that trivial. But anyway, this is shout out to Chewy as well and Seth Shepard. The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill. Hold 1 million Bitcoin for at least 20 years. And the game theory is on for other countries. So that is exactly what Cynthia Lummis tried to explain, what unfortunately DJ Trump didn't explain when he was up on stage. So she came up and cleared it all out. She said, this is the Louisiana Purchase Moment. She said, we want to accumulate 1 million Bitcoin, 5% of the Bitcoin supply to be used for only strategic purposes to reduce the U.S. national debt. That's it. And I explained in yesterday's video how Michael Saylor showed that an allocation towards Bitcoin could actually make the U.S. debt-free over time, because the capital appreciation of Bitcoin will far surpass the ability to print debt. Even though I just showed you we're right at 35 trillion. But a small allocation to Bitcoin can be an absolute game changer. And I'm so happy to hear these politicians understand this. The final slide. And although this goes really quick, it's 38 slides. It took 8 hours to put together. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like if you do. This is Vivek, comes on at the very end with Senator Blackburn. The lady in the middle, Vivek, is on the left. And they spoke about support of Bitcoin-related policies. Blackburn aligns with Senator Lummis, and Vivek emphasizes the importance of excellence. Blackburn, adorned with jewelry, indicates upcoming transaction privacy legislation, and Republicans, along with national data privacy laws and rights, will get something done. And Vivek, most importantly, he explicitly stated, in no uncertain terms, if you want freedom, you have one choice. And I don't want this to be a political thing, but he said out loud, if you all want the above freedoms, you have to vote for Trump. So all these people, at least from what I see, that came to the show are all very pro-Bitcoin and mostly pro-freedom, which is what we like. Math, money, freedom. That's why I make these videos. So that was day 2. Hope you enjoy the show. Hope you liked it. And yeah, it was overall a mixed day. I want to check on the Bitcoin price before I leave you all. Bitcoin's back at 68,800 after dipping all the way down to 66,700. So there was a lot of disappointment during the Trump show, but it popped right back. And that's the end. Thank you all for coming. I'll see you all tomorrow. I'm going to go back to work now on the weekend Q&A, which has some very challenging questions and a little bit about this too as well. Mike, long-term holder, thank you so much for coming, and thank you to the mods in the chat. Sorry for being late today. I wanted to wait for Vivek to wrap up and then bring it all to you. So hope you enjoyed it. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments below as well. Thank you. Good night.